Session. Is there any reportable action?
No, the City Council considered the
And
matters.
we got to make sure you all talk into your microphone. We're getting complaints.
I try not to, but you really? Okay. I mean, nobody wants to hear what I
Oh
have
my
to say.
God, just speak into the microphone.
The council considered those matters listed on the agenda, and there are no reportable actions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hoffman, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And tonight our pastor could not attend, so we're going to have Councilperson Grunmeyers do the invocation.
Thank you, Mayor Bash. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will please assume an attitude of prayer. Dear Lord, we come to you this evening grateful that you have seen fit to provide protection and a community for us that values open space and values their neighbors, and an atmosphere, Lord, where we can have some room to enjoy a variety of activities that a lot of communities here in Southern California don't get to enjoy. And Lord, as we press forward through hopefully the end of this pandemic, and we readjust, I pray, Lord, that you would be with our residents and our city staff, that we would all be able to extend grace to those around us, as we would like it to be extended to us as well. And Lord, I pray that as we reintegrate into some sort of normalcy, that we would remember that kindness and caring are so important, and that that would be in the forefront of what we do and how we interact with each other as we go about our business. And Lord, I'm so thankful for those in public safety that you have provided to our community, and that they've continued to keep us safe. And I just pray that as members of the council up here, that you would help to have us have an open mind, to be fair, and that you would grant us wisdom as we do the work that our residents have called us to do. Thank you for all your blessings for our community. In your name we pray, amen.
So, kind of a side remark from Councilperson Allman a few weeks ago. She said, you know, we should maybe bring in the Boy Scouts and do something interesting and to start our meetings. And pre-COVID, we did a whole bunch of stuff. It was a lot of fun. We'd bring in people and fuss over them and have the Boy Scouts come. And I suddenly realized we're going to have to make this work. So I came up with an idea that during these really challenging times, each one of us each week would identify somebody that to us exemplified not only just terrificness in their life and serving others, but also during COVID exemplified a spirit to help other people. So tonight, I'm going to pick the first one. The idea behind that, it doesn't mean there aren't 1,000 people, particularly in Norco, that would deserve some kind of recognition. But for me, I get to pick the first one, and it was kind of a dead bang boom. The first person I thought of, so I'm going to come down. So if you could stand like right there. So anyway, as I said, my first choice, just boom, was Bob Pryor. and I don't know if you know him, and part of that may be because he's humble, and I don't think I've ever heard him say anything that wasn't humble. I first met Bob several years ago when I was helping students get into math classes, my daughter in particular. And Bob became my go-to person when I needed to get help or a class for a Norco High kid. And he was always there. He was always available. In the old days, I had to take a certain test, and Bob was right there. And then I began to get to know him through the Day of the Child, which how many years have you supported? 28 years, the Day of the Child. And then, he doesn't know this, but I kind of wanted to be like him because he is the most kind person, and I don't think I've ever heard him raise his voice. You've probably heard him raise his voice. That's his wife sitting, never. And so he told me he was a Kiwanian, and I actually didn't know what that was. And so I thought, well, I'll join the Kiwanis. What the heck? And over the course of the Kiwanis, this guy, and you might want to cover your ears, Mrs. Pryor, this guy's given away like thousands of dollars to students for scholarships, and just, I mean, so many times I've seen him in meetings just say, well, I'll put in $100 or $500 or more. And it's very, very impressive. And during COVID, he has been a key person in our organization, the Kiwanis, to assist, and she's going to kill me. You can't throw your shoes at me, but Robin runs a food bank. And the Kiwanis decided, mainly through Bob, to say, hey, we're going to support this. And he goes over, he sits, and they have fed hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people. And Bob has been a key driving force behind feeding thousands of people through the Kiwanis. I could go on and on about this young man who just retired. He was one of the original professors at Norco College. He just retired, and when I grow up, I want to be like Bob Pryor, and I am not kidding. He is a wonderful human being, and so we're going to give him the inaugural Spirit of Norco Award, and I just want to say congratulations and thank you for everything you do for the citizens of Norco and for the students, and a lot of times without pay, and you're just a very impressive human being. Thank you. Here's your award, and do you want to say a few words? You got to turn this way because we have cameras so that people can see you.
Well, Kevin, you sound like you know me better than I know myself. Thank you so much for being my friend, number one. It's an honor to know you and to work with you, and to, through you and through our Kiwanis Club, help the citizens of Norco, primarily the children of Norco, high school down to kindergarten and younger. It's, this is a true honor for me personally, but I think, as you said, there are really a lot of people in this town that are just as deserving and just as impressive. And it'd be great if we got to know their stories as well. Thank you.
So can we get a picture? Okay.
I'll just wipe them up with you, Kevin.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. He can't do it out here.
She's shaking her head and does it again. So. Thank you again, Bob. We appreciate it. Now moving on to City Council communications reports on regional boards and commissions. We will start with, drum roll. Thank you. Bye-bye, guys. Matt broke it. Oh, Councilman Hoffman. Nope. Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Thank you. Well, as you can see, February 18th, we had our annual meeting with Congressman Calvert. And Kevin, I'll leave to you in case you want to make any comments about that meeting. And then March 1st, we had our housing subcommittee meeting, Councilmember Grunmeyer and City Manager Okoro. And then just I had a review. Tomorrow we have our CDA board meeting, and I had a review of a couple of the items with Andy and Chad on a couple of certain directions to go, which I'll report on at our next council meeting.
Thank you, sir. Oh, we missed Catherine. Go back. There we go.
On February 25th, I represented the city on the Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority Board of Directors, and I was elected vice chair of the board.
Wow. Congratulations.
Nothing to report.
Oh, that's such a fib. Such a fib. All right. Councilmember Hoffman?
Yeah, I was busy. I met with the public safety, our lieutenants and chief, fire chief, regarding, this is just a proposed public safety memorial. We're kicking around an idea, so just that's our beginning. We got to start somewhere, so it's an idea. And then in the afternoon, Northwest Mosquito and Vector Control District meeting. One of the things that came up in the entomologists is, especially for our riders out there, we've had a dry winter, and it hasn't really been that cold. So guess what? The tick season will be early this year. The mosquito season will be early this year. So for our riders down in the Santa Ana River Trail, just think about the ticks. They're going to be out. Also, this week, and I'll get later on, we confirmed our American Mosquito Control Conference, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's unusual. Monday, February 22nd, I had a meeting with staff regarding the Santa Ana River Trail project, and that was in regards to the Riverside County Transportation Commission, our Western Riverside County Programs and Projects Committee. For those you don't know, RCTC has taken the lead on the trail and the permits and all the planning and working with these other agencies on the Santa Ana River Trail project. We got to vote on SAR, the Santa Ana River Trail project, as it goes by the dam and through Corona, the Butterfield Park, and that way in on the city's western border. I was not happy. And for those you didn't know, the trail that used to be approved from 2015 to 2019 by the regional board, the Regional County Parks Board and Trails Program, is coming out of the riverbed by River Road and going up on city streets. The Army Corps of Engineers does not want it in the river bottom. That was their decision, so they're going to push it up along Rincon and up in Corridon. I found out other things too about it. The reason they had to is because, and the same thing's happened in Eastvale, they mitigated the property where most of that trail was supposed to go in the river bottom, and they mitigated it so they could do the rest of the stuff by the dam. So that property now is off limits to keep the trail down there. This is going to continue, and the phase that goes through Norco on the west end is not done, is not confirmed yet. We still have a lot. The trail part along Eastvale is not finished. It still has to. They've got to fix it. And so, like I said, they heard my 2 cents worth, and I explained to them that this wasn't fair to the equestrians, but the Army Corps of Engineers is calling the shot, and there's nothing we can do about it. And on the 24th, the Riverside County Flood Control Water Conservation District Zone 2 budget. Be happy to know, Sam, all 7 of your projects you submitted were approved, and Norco took the lion's share of the money that's usually gone for Corona and part of the Woodcrest area for their projects. One of the things, and I found this, it's really unique, is that, and for Catherine, the recycled water that's coming out of the RCWA plant and that, and this is why I think in the future, remember it says Water Conservation District on there. They're helping to fund the City of Corona's Reclaim Water Project from RCWA into their city so they can put it back into the water table, going back and filling into the aquifers. That's a good thing. And so that's a good thing. So as we look at our projects down the road, I know we got a lot of flood control projects, things that we may want to think of in the future. There is actually even LAFCO is looking at this as the Water Quality Municipal Wastewater Agencies. That is their cure, is to take, and this is the flood control project, is in the off season, the non-raining season, is to capture the waters coming out of the flood control projects, the runoff and stuff like that during the summer months, trying to get that into a reclaimed water system in the future. This is their plans. So that's, as you look down the road, instead of letting this water just go into the river and down to the ocean, is try to save and capture it, because as you well know, we're in a dry year and we're going to be water shortage again. So this is what they're trying to do, is they're trying to utilize the flood control district and that to future to reclaim some of this water. So it was interesting that's how we opened up our meeting, is to do that. So things are changing, just not flood water. Of course, so we went through flood control, the LAFCO, again, I reported on that one. Again, that's part of it. The Riverside Transit Agency executive meeting we had, still trying to get the bus ridership. It's down. I attended the budget meeting this morning, late this afternoon, regarding it. They're happy schools are coming back, because hoping they'll see ridership come up. So, but they're still at 72% ridership, and we're working on it. As part of the WRCOG meeting, executive committee, which we meet the OWA, which is One Water, One Waterway report, which deals with the area of the Santa Ana River that covers Corona, actually all in Riverside County, our section down here. We meet March 25th, so that's a good thing. We have a new director of SAPWA, the Santa Ana River Water thing, so that's good. George Ingalls Park Veterans Executive Committee, which I'm the chairman. We met with the Blue and Gold Star mothers regarding the proposed monument we're going to build up there for them. They have worked very diligently about putting that monument up there, the memorial up there, and Brian and his staff, and along with the committee, worked very hard in putting together a letter for donations to it. We're going to get donations. We have some very good commitments right now, and hopefully we'll be able to announce pretty soon those commitments and where they are. So Brian, I'm looking to you as we look at after our next meeting to get those commitments out, to let them done in that letter. Okay, so that's good. Good, so that's good. And you know, this is coming out of some of the monies we set aside from the development agreement that we did with Caprock. So we're going to have this thing, and hopefully that memorial will be done, dedicated by the end of September, which is on Gold Star Family Day recognition. Let me see what else I meant. I'm attending a virtual American Mosquito Control Association conference. I started Tuesday, 2 to 3 hours a day online, and these guys are dedicated. Let me tell you, I have found out there's 3,000 different types of mosquitoes in the world, and just in Florida alone, there's over 300. Also found out, in our area, for those that didn't know, our biggest thing is dogs and horses are affected by the West Nile, and help me out, I'm going to miss this, heartworm in dogs. Mosquitoes are very in our area. So we really want to watch our mosquitoes. I said they're going to come out early this year. Watch out for your standing water and make sure we take that in there. It's some of the speakers at this conference, and it's just not, this is worldwide. They have people from all over the world attending this conference, doing it virtually. And they're a pretty intense group, how to get rid of mosquitoes. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's session where they talk about drones and that how to take care of the mosquitoes in the riverbed. But I've taken up enough time, so thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
So tentative meeting with Congressman Calvert, actually two of them. The important part of that is that the high transmission line project, he told us we could quote him, so anybody listening, he has stated that it's incredible, but all of this turmoil that's been caused by the city of Riverside, and they didn't start with the first thing they should have started with, which is the NEPA process, because they need to swap land in order to go through some federal wildlife areas. They haven't even started. They haven't even done any of the environmental impact studies. Congressman Calvert said it would take 20 years, it would be impossible, and he says, I'm not going to allow them to run high transmission lines. If they can underground them in Chino, they can underground them in his district. Should they decide, I've since spoken to another attorney, should they decide to go around that area, they have to start the process all over again. And so one of the things I later asked, I said, well, is this project dead? And the response was, as a doornail. The only people that don't know it yet, unfortunately, are the council people in Riverside. They're being told by their staff that this is a go and it's almost there. And the NEPA process, which we know because we deal with Navy surplus, is a nightmare. So anyway, we're staying diligent on that. Blue Gold Star Mother, the school GG board, the bond committee meeting. We're getting a lot of extra things in Norco in terms of Norco High School. I'm going to ask about the gymnasium to find out where we are on that at Norco High School. But the intermediate school is almost done. We're planning the annual convention. We're going to make that fun this year, and I'll later on talk about that. Next one, Blue Gold Star Mother, it's really getting fun. A lot of support from a lot of people outside the community is coming in. One of the things that we're dealing with at the Cal Cities Community Services Policy Committee, and I'm really excited about this, Brian Petrie is going to, and I can't think of the, Jenny Warnock. You probably know her. Anyway, we are going to be presenting our Park and Rec program to the entire state of California, basically, and representatives. And then we're going to have like an open forum with Brian, possibly Michelle Englund, and somebody from another area. And then we're having the consultant that we're working with on homelessness in June 4th. She will be presenting to basically the state of California representatives, and then she will be talking to somebody from Northern California, and then we'll have an open forum. We're being told that our policy committee meetings are some of the best, so I'm trying to show off Norco because that consultant is also a Norco resident. And that's about it. So moving on. Moving on to item 2, the city council consent items. Does anybody wish to pull something at this time? E, Greg? Anyone else? So do I hear a motion to approve the rest? Do I hear a second? May I have a vote?
Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman? Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion
Greg?
passes unanimous.
Thank you. E?
Thank you, Mayor. Just try to make this brief. For the last, since our Public Works Director isn't here, but our Assistant Director is, Sam. But the last couple of days, been reviewing this with Chad, and I've just come to, with our discussions on this, I believe it would be to our advantage to, on this item, since we only received 2 qualified bids on this project, that we reject the bids and then ask staff to review the specifications and put this item out to bid again. So just try to keep it very clean and simple.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, my motion is to reject the 2 bids, or the apparent low bidder at this time.
I second that. Any discussion?
Under discussion. And I concur with both of you on that. And there's only 2 bidders, but unfortunately, one of the bidders is already one of the subcontractors. Is that not true? So it's already there. So he's the main contractor. Yeah. So okay. So essentially, we just have one outside bid on it. If you look at it that way, I mean, I know he's a current contractor, but he's already there, and I agree with you. We need more bids. So I just clarifying that.
And just in I don't want to belabor it. There were more contractors at the bid walk, but only 2 bids were received.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, may we have a vote?
Councilmember Alaman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous.
Moving on to 4 public comments. City Clerk, can you please read the public comment rules for phones
Yes.
and how the rules behind public comments? I'm so happy you read that now. I hated that.
No problem. Now is the time to dial in for public comment. For routine general comments, item number 4, you will be placed in a queue and your call will be answered in the order received. You will have 3 minutes to speak. The call will disconnect promptly at the end of 3 minutes. You will need to call during each item you wish to speak upon. Callers are asked to abide by public decorum and use language that is appropriate to a public environment. Please dial 951-582-5557 now. Thank you. Do we have any callers in the queue? Mayor, we have no callers, and we have no email public comments at this time.
Okay. Closing public comments. Moving on to 5A. Order presentation for discussion items. Staff report presentation. 2, council questions of staff. Public speakers in favor, against, or neutral. 4, council discussion and action. 5A is approve a professional services agreement between the City of Norco and Client First Technology Consulting in the amount of $57,807 for a comprehensive information technology IT assessment and IT master plan. Moving to the Deputy City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Before you tonight is a professional services agreement between the City of Norco and Client First Technology Consultant to complete an IT assessment, risk assessment, and master plan. As part of this process, we advertised for consultants to provide us a proposal based on the guidelines in which we asked the various consultants to submit to us to do this assessment. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to ask our IT administrator to come forward and give you a quick scenario of our process, and then we also have the consultant in the audience tonight to give you a quick overview, and then we would like to open it up to any questions that the council may have. So if I could have Matt come forward right now. He's done a quick presentation for this, and I want to compliment Matt on the process that we did on this. He was very thorough and did a great job of the RFP process and going through the whole process for us to get to where we are. Go ahead, Matt.
Matt, just be sure to speak right into the microphone. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor. Hello and good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. What you have before you is item 5A for a proposed professional services agreement between the city and Client First for a comprehensive IT assessment and master plan. Can we switch to the presentation, please? Thank you. As mentioned in the staff report, technology is evolving at a rapid pace. The threat of attack is constant, and methods are rapidly changing. For those of us in the municipal tech sector, we've seen multiple cities and agencies hit not only with ransomware and viruses, but also facing significant issues for recovery after an attack. Some of these issues stem from the lack of not having updated infrastructure and information technology business practices. Over the years, the city's information technology department has generally improved thanks to the support from the city council and the city manager. In 2012, the council approved the installation of the city's fiber optics network. That allowed communication between all of our city facilities and vastly improved communication within our SCADA network for water delivery and treatment. Additionally, the fiber network has also enabled us to use the Census AMR system for automated water meter reads for the utility billing and public works departments. Another part of that, in 1996, the city purchased and used the Acellus Permits Plus program for community development. At the time, it was revolutionary and it worked great. Recently, staff has had some issues with that, and we approved, council approved the purchase of the Tyler New World ERP Community Development Module. That implementation is going live in 2 weeks from now, and city staff is super excited to get into that modern age equipment. So another software milestone for us was the transition of our animal control record keeping software from a DOS-based green screen program from the 80s and 90s to a more advanced system that we can all use and look up records. It even automates the records of animals that are available at the shelter for the public to look at online. And additionally, improvements in communication have proven useful as we transition from an analog phone system to our more advanced ShoreTel system with call queues, work groups, and email delivery of voice messages. Communication between city staff and the public has improved as we make continual additions to our city website. And we even added a mobile app for phones and tablets, and we reach out to our residents via text via the Nixle Everbridge platform as well. So, and speaking of the city website, we've advanced just dramatically. Just as a blurb here, as you can see in the early 2000s, page on the left there shows a nice little GIF images moving. And I was super surprised and kind of impressed by it, but we had music that would turn on whenever you'd visit the webpage. So here it is. Pop up whenever you'd visit the city's webpage in the early 2000s. So where are we?
You're laughing, but Greg and I live this.
Well, I think a big part of it too that I was impressed with was the Cowhands Wanted portion of that right there, where it for our HR department right here for job listings. So. What does this mean for us, though? For us to keep progressing, to keep moving forward, and to stay current with technology, we need a comprehensive IT assessment and master plan. So despite all these great advancements that we've made over the years, the city has never had an IT assessment. We need an assessment conducted to evaluate our current level of risk, have recommendations for what key infrastructure items we need to update, and have an IT business process review. The proposed partner tonight, Client First, came highly recommended by multiple members of the MESAC community throughout the state of California. The city manager, deputy city manager, and I were impressed with the proposal and the result of the interview with this firm. And with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Client First.
Good evening, Mayor Mash and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and talk to you about this important project. And we've prepared a presentation. We've been asked to be kind of quick, so if we talk fast, forgive us and stop us if you want to ask questions. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay. Right here?
You'll start with assessing that button thing.
That button?
I thought this was our first test.
Yeah.
All right. So as far as introductions, my name's David Kraut. I'm the founder and managing partner of Client First. We've been in business for 17 years right here in Corona, coincidentally, and started out as a CPA and an auditor and got into technology consulting working with cities on ERP type projects. And so I've been doing these types of projects since the 90s, and I was told to put that little map there just to let you know that I coincidentally happen to live right here in Norco, about 12 minutes away. And so if there's any issues, I'll be sure to be right down here.
And I'm Tom Jacobson. I've been in the business 35 years. When we interviewed, I told Matt I've been doing technology since before there were PCs, which Matt couldn't quite get to. But and I handle the IT operations, cybersecurity, disaster recovery, those types of things for our firm.
All right, we'll try to keep talking about ourselves brief, but just so you understand who we are local government technology consulting firm only. We work all across the country, predominantly with municipalities, but also with utilities and school districts, and happen to be headquartered right here in Corona. And if you want to know what that dark state is, it's the only state one of our managers hasn't done a project in. As I mentioned, 17 years, we've worked with over 500 government agencies, over 2,500 projects, and done this scope of project over 100 times and dozens of times right here in California. Oh, I was told to put this map in here too, which is the map to our office, which is also about 12 minutes away. These are most of the Southern California cities that we've worked with that we could fit on a slide, and but we work all up and down the state of California. Probably 40% of our business is right here in California, and the rest is around the United States.
The plan, why do a technology master plan? It's
Can
really
you speak into the
align-
microphone? I'm sorry.
You need to speak more into the microphone?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to raise it up
There
so I
you
don't
go.
have to bend to my knees. To align technology with the city's goals, identify and budget for initiatives to improve resident services, that's always first, increase efficiency, and as Matt said, reduce risk. Planning will make expenditures more efficient. The technology plan will focus staff on projects that create the most value, to improve resident services, we talked to. We're going to talk about cybersecurity a great deal, and to right-size the IT resources to meet the city's need. Plan will be flexible, and the city will be able to administer the plan for 5 to 7 years after we do this. Benefits of the plan, this is Mendocino County. We did a plan for them 3 years ago. These are some of the benefits that we derived from the planning process. They're a little bigger than you, so the staff savings are just a little bit bigger. Just in the procurements payable area, we found 33,000 staff hours of potential improvements. In timekeeping, we found 6,000 staff hours. And in the budget process, there's over 200 spreadsheets that can be eliminated. We did a plan about 4 years ago for the city of Rancho Mirage. One of the things we do is we work with Rancho Mirage regularly. So I asked the IT manager how the plan went after about 3 years, and this is a quote from him. "The city manager is pleased, council is pleased, and it's a lot of fun." Of course, Jason would say that. He got promoted about 2 years after we did the plan. In 3 years, they've done 51 of the 51 of the 80 initiatives. They're about 64% complete.
All right, what you can expect in the result, some of those highlights is that this is going to be an assessment of the existing IT environment to create a baseline. This plan is really not about the past. You guys have done a really good job of advancing technology over the course of many years, but the plan is going to be focused on the future. We're going to assess all of the department applications and systems. We're going to prioritize these initiatives and projects with you. So we're not just interviewing people, writing a report and presenting. We're going to collaboratively develop an actionable roadmap for you for several years to come. Matt and Tom have talked about improved cybersecurity, improving your posture there. Those threats and those issues just continue to grow year after year. We talk a lot about efficiency and productivity because we are much more about department operations and the technology that's needed to assist those operations and the IT infrastructure and security and support needed to do that. So this is a very collaborative project. We'll be working with dozens of city staff so that we can educate, transfer knowledge, and create buy-in at all levels of the organization. Governance is critical in a plan like this, making sure that there's a good mechanism in place to review and manage this plan and implement it and collaborate on an ongoing basis. And lastly, to make sure that your plan aligns with your strategic plan. You guys have a number of different technology initiatives in your current strategic plan, and I'm sure this is going to create a bunch more for the future. So this slide is kind of helps you understand our basic philosophy. I know it's a little complicated, but does this have a pointer? So if you look at the center column and you look at the bottom, you've got infrastructure of a building. So a lot of folks look at technology and they think of the infrastructure first. But if you're going to build that infrastructure, it's not about the infrastructure first. There's some type of operations, a purpose for that operation, in this case a building, and the infrastructure is then designed to support all of that. In the left column, what you see, it's a little small, but those are different types of municipal departments and operations, and they run a whole lot of applications and systems. And I have no doubt your system, your city has got over 100 different applications. I don't know yet, but maybe it's more than 150. It's quite more complex than people realize. And so we want to focus on operations, what they need, the infrastructure, security, and IT support they need to support all of that. So we really, it is about technology, but it's about your operations.
The plan calls for 5 focused areas. We talked about strategy. We talked about a 5 to 7 year plan. The next one down, risk assessment. Again, we've talked about that. We put a little picture in there of Matt fighting off the demons from the computer systems. Next slide. Technical infrastructure, as David spoke about, it's really to support the operations of the city and the residents. The application portfolio, do the city's applications meet? Do the applications meet the city's needs? What can be done to improve them, to improve efficiencies and how they work? And then staffing, which is staffing levels, skill sets. Is more training needed to do the things that the city is going to need to do in the future, and recommendations thereof. This is a summary of some strategies, goals, and objectives from another plan. We talked about governance and staffing, and GIS is key, and then Matt talked to you a little bit about an ERP enhancement that's coming on board in a couple of weeks. We also have a series of benchmarks that we maintain for like-sized communities. We work mostly, as you can see from our previous slide, with small to mid-sized municipalities. About 90-some% is local government, 99%. Over 75% are municipalities. The rest are special districts and some school districts. We maintain some specific benchmarks that will help us to describe how well or poorly the city is doing compared to your peers. And we'll describe those to you later on as we go through the planning process. And finally, here's the capital plan budget. This is the document that once we're all done, should you approve the plan, that the city will use day in and day out over the years. We provide all our documentation in Word and Excel so that it's the city's to maintain. And we got a call about a month ago from a sanitation district that said, okay, we had our plan, we worked on it for 4 years, we're about done, we want a budget number to do it again after 5. We have other municipalities that it takes them 7. It just really depends. But it's usually in that range. I think there's, 2 times? That 2 times that somebody said, no, I want to do the plan in 4 years. That's very rare for us. Questions?
So, do we have any questions? Robin? No? Ted?
So, as typically, since you've worked in Riverside County, and so is this assessment also going to be on the Wi-Fi in our city then? You'll be doing an assessment on that?
Yeah, essentially this is a holistic project, so we're going to talk to all departments about all technology and all issues related to technology.
Okay. It's one of the things that plagues our city, but that's, you all know, working in Riverside County, the hills and everything else we do it, so thank you.
We understand.
Catherine? Greg?
No question.
Well, I'm excited about this myself, and we joke about this, but Andy, I'm going to use this opportunity. You have done. I can remember going to a conference with you, and we'd messaged through the water bill, and we had probably the worst website there was in the entire world. This is about 2000. You just become city manager, whatever year that was, and already the strides that have been made are unbelievable, and I have to credit you, and I have to credit Brian, Matt, bringing you aboard. This is like, for me, the next step. So I personally am very excited by this. I'm glad, Andy, that you're looking forward on all of this. So and Brian too, I got to include. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I got to tell you a little story. When we were talking about this, and Andy said, let's take a look at our last 15 years, excuse me. Well, Andy actually started the Department for Information Technology and from scratch, and borrowing, we took a draftsman and kind of moved him over and did a lot of different things, and we've come a long ways. So we're talking with Matt about all of the great things that have happened, and so back 15 years ago, and it was interesting because Matt said, well, I was in junior high. So it kind of gave us a real perspective. I think Andy and I are dinosaurs now. But the one thing is that this is a growing, evolving area all the time. And just this week, Matt keeps us alert of potential things that could be at risk to us getting into our system. So what this will do is really help us plan for the future. So it's actually very good money well spent for us, and helping us also reaching out to our community better for information.
Yeah, and I really thank you too, Andy, for your leadership on the fiber optics. I mean, that was a huge thing that you put together on that, and cost a lot of money. We caught some flack for it, but it was well worth the time. So pretty much the entire city is now run with fiber optics, correct? Yeah, and we had none in 2009, none. So
based upon Brian's comment and one comment that you made about PCs, when I was assistant superintendent in that wonderful school district, I was proudly installed at the state-of-the-art IBM System 3.
When he first started, he had an Abacus. So, so do I hear a motion to approve?
Mayor, we would need to go to
Oh,
public
I'm sorry,
comment,
that's right.
please.
Do we have any public comments?
We will have ask for callers to call in at this time for item 5A related to the IT issue that's on the floor right now. If you could please dial 951-582-5557 now.
Slide rule. Yeah, I had a slide rule.
We have no. Mayor, we have no public comment at this time. Thank
Closing
you.
public comments. Do I hear a motion to approve? Discussion? Seeing none. Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton?
Yes.
Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Moving on to 5B, Sheriff's Department Annual Report Presentation for 2020, Lieutenant Rowan. Hello, Chief. How you doing?
Sir, let's see. Good evening, Mayor and Honorable Council.
Make sure you, I'm sorry, we get complaints, so make sure you
I'm
use
sorry,
that
let me
microphone.
step right up. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
First off, I want to just say it's my honor to be selected as your newest police chief for the city of Norco. And tonight I'm going to be presenting the Norco Sheriff's Annual Report for 2020. Figure out the clicker here. There we go. Riverside County Sheriff's Department is honored to be a partner with the city of Norco. As you all know, Norco was the first city to contract with the Sheriff's Department. Today we have 16 different contract partners. In this presentation, I'm going to provide you with a summary of your police services in 2020, the reportable Part 1 crime stats, as well as traffic statistics. Before we get started, I just want to apologize first for my voice. Had a nasty bout of food poisoning last night, so its throat's still a little bit rough. So bear with me. The Norco Sheriff's Office is made up of a dedicated lieutenant, an executive secretary, a part-time lobby CSO. We have 2 sergeants that are stationed here out of the contract supported rate. Our patrol operations are 24/7. We deploy 48 patrol hours a day, which equals 8 deputies. Essentially, that's 2 deputies per shift, both sides of the week. We have 2 dedicated traffic deputies. We have 3 dedicated special enforcement team deputies and 4 dedicated non-sworn CSOs. This chart just shows an overview of the daily staffing levels. Essentially, on any given day, we have between 7 and 16 personnel working between all ranks and non-sworn. Of our of all the sworn personnel at the station, we have over 250 years of combined law enforcement service. 7 of our 13 deputies assigned to Norco are field training officers, which means we're getting the cream of the crop assigned here. Logistically, we have 17 marked sheriff units. We have 3 unmarked vehicles. We have a mobile command post. We have 1 off-road side-by-side Polaris vehicle, 2 bicycles, and 3 Norco citizen patrol vehicles. We're also equipped with mobile field force equipment and less lethal munitions. In 2020, we received 9,322 calls for service. That was a 2.7% increase over 2019, where we received 9,073 calls for service. So although we did have an increase in calls for service, our response times actually dropped by 16%. So that was measured through all categories, 1 through 4 of the priorities, going from 28 minutes to 23 minutes. And obviously those are separated out as well by priority. So the priority ones, which would be the top priority, are a lot less, but this is a combined total of all the priorities. The Part 1 crimes are the reportable UCR stats that we send to the FBI every year. So those have been being calculated and disseminated since the 1930s. It essentially is a nationwide crime stats that every city produces and we can all view. This year, or in 2020 I should say, we had an overall decrease of 5.5% from 718 Part 1 crimes in 2019 down to 678 in 2020. The property crimes decreased by 15% from 669 to 563. and violent crimes decreased by 22% from 49 to 38. And this is just a 5-year overview of our Part 1 crimes, our UCR report crimes. And you can see that we just have a fairly steady decline in reportable Part 1 crimes. In 2020, one of our goals was to increase proactivity, to have the deputies conduct their own follow-up investigations for quicker closures, which means essentially we're not sending those to the Harupa Valley Station where they're assigned to an investigator. We're trying to develop our deputies to handle the call from start to finish if possible, or at least get the majority of the investigation done before it has to go to investigators. So we have a lot of high-quality investigations being conducted out of Norco, and because they're not being sent to the station where they're assigned to an investigator with other caseloads from other cities or county area, we're able to get those closed quicker. The arrests are up by about 10%, from 410 in 2019 to 458 in 2020. The traffic overview. So in 2020, we conducted 68 separate traffic operations. Those were funded by OTS and the city. Those include DUI saturation patrols and safety checkpoints, speed enforcement, crosswalk, distracted driving operations, and we had a total of 49 DUI arrests in 2020. You can see that our traffic citations actually decreased by 26%, but our parking citations increased by 48. I'm attributing the decrease in the traffic citations to the COVID pandemic. We did have a moratorium on enforcement at one point, unless it was a super egregious crime during the height of the pandemic. We didn't do a lot of traffic enforcement just for the safety of our deputies. That has since gone back to normal, but I believe that's probably part of the reason. We also had several officers or deputies that were infected with COVID, so we had some people out at various times throughout the year. Our collisions have decreased across the board, so total collisions decreased to 456, a 24% decrease. The non-injury traffic collisions decreased by 27% to 405. The hit and run non-injury collisions decreased 23% to 111. Our injury collisions did increase slightly, 6% from 48 to 51, and our fatal traffic collisions stayed the same at 1. Again, this is just a chart of the overview of the last 5 years, so you can see we've been on a downward trend for the last 3 years. Community outreach suffered this year due to the COVID. We had quite a few events planned. Most of those had to be canceled. The one event that we did do was the trunk or treat, which was pretty successful from what I'm told. In 2021, we're hoping that things open up again and we can start some of those other community outreach projects that we have. The volunteer forces, unfortunately, we lost 2 volunteers to resignation, bringing us down to 15 total members. We had a total of 2,074 volunteer hours worked, which is down significantly from years past. And that was due to, we had a moratorium on volunteers for a while, several months, where we didn't allow volunteers to come in and work. And since we've reopened that, just we're not getting as many hours as we previously did. So again, we're hoping that that picks up in the rest of the remainder of this year. We did add a Norco Chaplain to our team, Phil Wozniak, and the Neighborhood Watch program was shut down due to COVID, so that should start up again once things start opening up. In March 2020, they added 1 dedicated deputy sheriff to the team through mid-year budget savings, and in July 2020, they added 1 additional deputy sheriff to the special enforcement team and an additional dedicated CSO to patrol. Some of the internal goals that were set for 2020 were increased proactive policing, increase in follow-up and case closure, career development through training for the deputies and CSOs, developing expertise, community outreach and volunteer recruitment. If you have any questions, I will take them at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Lieutenant Rowan? Greg?
Thank you, sir.
Catherine?
I do have a question, actually. You mentioned it looks like crime's going down in the various different areas, but that arrests went up?
Arrests did go up.
I'm just curious, right, as someone who's not in law enforcement, could you give some context for why that could happen?
Well, I would attribute that to one of the goals that was set internally, which would be the proactive policing. So we're actually trying to get the deputies out there and be more proactive with pedestrian checks, traffic stops, routine patrols, just making sure they're out in the community and visible, and in turn they're going to come across more individuals that are committing crimes or quicker to respond to crimes. So when you saw the response times are down, that means that we're getting to locations quicker, and so those calls that would end up with the suspect being out of the area, maybe now they're able to contact quicker.
Okay, great. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, because I think sometimes we see anecdotally people commenting in our community about crime and the rate of crime, and it's very subjective. When we look at the numbers and the data, we see that crime is going down. So thank you and welcome again.
Thank you.
Robin?
Thank you, Lieutenant, for the report. I certainly appreciate it. And along the lines of what Council Member Ellman had to say, when we just take social media at face value sometimes, I think there's a tendency to say crime is up, and we see a lot of package theft or vehicles being taken and those types of things. From your perspective, what can we as council do, or even city staff, to help maybe shift the image away from that and the information away from that to showing more of the data so that people do know that Norco is trending to be even more safe than it already is? Realizing the fact that it is important that social media is used as a tool, like here's the vehicle that stole my mail, or here's the person that was doing this. What's the balance from your perspective on making sure the messaging is correct to the community?
A lot of it would just be the continued outreach to the community, let them know the job that we're doing. It is a tough job, and it's a job that doesn't really always show the positive. People like to talk about, the negatives in life, so you don't get all the stories about the outreach or the things that the deputies are doing for the community, the relationships that we built out here. So a lot of it is just continuing to have that dialogue with the community and letting them know the job that we're doing, and just showing them the numbers. When you look at the numbers, it shows that the crime is down and the arrest is up. So we have a lot of very dedicated, enthusiastic deputies and CSOs that work in this community. This is one of those cities where we get deputies here and they never want to leave. So the deputies have a very close tie to this community, and they love to come to work and do their job. And so we just talk about that and let the community know that we're here for them, and that if it's kind of an open book. If they have questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then one other item, I know in the past we've had where folks have reported, on social media crime, for example, and your team has taken care of it and made an arrest. And not all the time does the follow-up go out with the original post. I know a few instances where your department has been able to say, hey, we got the person, or this has been resolved. Is that done every time on some of the ones that have a tendency to take off on social media, or how do you guys balance?
Generally, we don't let social media drive what we're going to put out. We do try and do press releases when we have significant cases to show, the work that the deputies are doing. We don't do press releases for all cases, depending on the nature of the incident. We also wouldn't do that if there was still additional investigation that can be done. So sometimes we'll make an arrest on a case, but that's not the end of the case. There's still additional suspects outstanding or additional follow-up that we can do. So it's kind of hit and miss. So we try and put out press releases and put that message out that we're doing good work for the community, but we still have to maintain the integrity of investigations when they're ongoing, so it could just depend on where the case is at.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much for your answers. And I'm hoping, that our residents are listening to this and again, reaching out to you and your staff individually, because you do have an amazing team here and they work so hard and do such an amazing job. And so I'm very thankful for your team here and what they do to serve the city of Norco. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ted.
Yeah, Lieutenant. 7 FTOs? That's great. How often do they get assigned a trainee?
We have a deputy sheriff trainee here this month.
So at least once a month we're getting a trainee with our with them, or more often. I'm just letting people know when they see a 2-man car that sometimes that's an FTO.
It depends on the push that we're getting from the academies or the jails. We've been running pretty high with our trainee numbers. I think the Harupa Valley Station has 11 trainees right now, so we're going to see over the next 4 months of that training cycle, we're going to have additional trainees out here probably that whole time.
Okay. And just so the residents know, we don't pay for those trainees in the car.
Correct.
Yeah,
The
right.
trainees are still paid for by the county budget.
And do they also training through the traffic here or just patrol?
Generally, they're assigned to patrol deputies here. They do get traffic training. That's generally done at the Harupa Valley Station.
Okay. And I know you talked about the public outreach. Hopefully we're going to shoot for National Night Out again in August.
That would be great.
Okay. So I don't know where the county is on it. I think it's Eastvale's turn, it's one of them. Right? We skipped Harupa Valley, but we're going to shoot for that, right? We're going to try to get that.
There's quite a few things we'd like to get back on the calendar.
All right. I'm just thinking about that. And then I noticed, and this might be in relationship to the traffic, but we had an increase in injury TCs and the last year in your report. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you think that the increase, we're only talking 6% or 3% because of the low numbers, and we have our total collisions are going down. I'm going to probably attribute part of that to a lack of people driving because of COVID at the time, or is that true or not? Or the fact that we have less people on the road speeding causing more of an injury TC? I'm just trying to...
You're asking about the increase in the injuries or the...
Yeah, the injury traffic. You have injury traffic collisions. I know there's only 3. It shows 6%. But the rest of them are all going down. The numbers are all going down. And that's it. You're just trying to... When you look at this, you got to figure out why they go up and why the other ones went down. Our collisions went down. I'm hoping it's because of enforcement, but do you think it also had to do with the COVID that we didn't have as many people driving around, especially going to school?
I think it'd be really hard for me to put my finger on it. The number is so small, so there's not really one thing that we can point to. It's just a small anomaly in the numbers, so we'd have to really look at a longer time frame to see if there was any real reason for that.
All right, that makes sense. I just didn't know why if you knew it had a reason. And then we had 68 OTS programs?
No, we had 68 operations total, so we did have some overlap in city funding into this year from before we added the second traffic deputy. So that city funding overlapped with our OTS grant.
Okay, well that's quite a bit for us, 68. That's pretty good. And then I know we all do this because we do the average on response times. And if and when and maybe in the future, when we do our average response times, if you can just separate out, I know you do the average, that's fine. Just bring in the priority 1 calls, just the average, so people don't think that they call us for an emergency that's going to take us, because they don't know, they're going to take us 23 minutes to get there. So it's just one of those things. So when they look at it, it's confusing. I know it and you know it.
And we have those. I can actually send them to Andy, and he can send those out to you.
Just if somebody asks if something happens, what's the average response time for a priority 1 call? And because we're used to just doing Part 1 crimes. And for people that haven't been around the area, the Part 1 crimes, you've got them listed here. The only one not up here is arson, is right on your sheet.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things we do that the average person doesn't know what a Part 1 crime is and why some are there and some aren't. So this, because I remember I used to have to do these sheets, the same thing. What's a Part 1 crime? But good job, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. I think you can tell we're all very proud of our department and the representatives, and I'm always glad to hear the deputies are happy to be here. I hope they get waved at a lot and get a lot of support from us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Moving on to...
Mayor will call for public comment on this item.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, public comment. Sorry.
Now is the time to dial in for public comment for item 5B regarding the sheriff's annual report. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please dial 951-582-5557 if you'd like to speak now. Thank you. Do we have any callers in the queue? We have no callers in the queue, and we have no public comment for this item.
Closing public comments. I'll get this right by November, you watch. So moving on to 5C.
It's a receive and file?
This is a receive and file.
We still need a motion for...
All right, do I hear a
I move
motion?
to receive and file the 2020 Sheriff's Report.
Second.
Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton?
Yes.
Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 5C.
Yeah.
Review of the adopted Code of Ethics Resolution number 2013-21 and Administrative Policy and Procedures 311 for the City Council members, Commission members, City employees, City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight before you is an item that was requested at City Council on February 3rd, 2021 by Councilmember Grummeyer and Mayor Pro Tem Newton to have the adopted Code of Ethics come back to City Council for review. You have been provided the Policy and Procedures number 311, along with the previous resolutions that have adopted previous Code of Ethics and the current Code of Ethics for your review, along with some of the neighboring cities' best practices that they have been doing. I provided you all the information, and we are here tonight to ask for feedback from you. Thank you.
So, Robin, since this was your motion, would you like to start?
Sure. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there was several residents that reached out regarding a code of ethics for the city of Norco. I think originally there was an impression that there wasn't a code of ethics at all for the city of Norco. When I'm doing research for this type of thing, I'm not typically going to reach out to city staff. I'm going to go ahead and use the city website and go through the processes that our residents would go through to see what's available and what our residents would see if they were doing the research on their own. When it comes to this particular document, and going back through minutes of the meetings when this was done, which is in 2013, it's hard to tell without looking at the recordings, but I think it would be safe to say that there were some disagreements even in some portions of this, specifically looking at an accountability part of a code of ethics, and I might be speaking out of turn, so I know some of you were here during that time, and so if I am, please correct me. And so reading through and bringing this up is number one, so the residents know that we heard their requests, several of them, and it's being brought up to the council for discussion. And reading through the document, I think for me personally, we just need to make sure that there's accountability to the members of the council for following the code of ethics. What that looks like, I'm not 100% sure, and I'm open to discussion on that. But I've always kind of been of the frame of mind that if we're going to create ordinances or laws or rules or codes, that we need to be accountable to whatever we create. Because creating a document or a policy or a procedure in the name of just quelling, some occasional thing that might pop up, or just having it so to pacify someone, really isn't in interest of what I would care to do. And so that's where I'm at. Specifically on 2013-01, that one does have the enforcement and sanctions. My understanding is that was kind of the first stab at getting the code of ethics done. And then 2013-21, again, from my reading, is the only thing that was removed was that last section of enforcement and sanctions. So again, I'm not familiar why between February and May that change was made. And so again, if anybody that's here can enlighten me as to that part, I would certainly be appreciative of that. And I'll leave it to discussion for the rest of us before any decisions made.
Greg, since you seconded it, any comments?
I think trying to remember back attending that meeting was, I would rely on you, Kevin. You were on council at that time and had the votes, but being in the audience and listening to some of this discussion and the couple of council members that I don't need to name that had objections to it, I would kind of go with, Robin's question on this also is, why are enforcements and, I have a guess, but why are enforcements and sanctions, why did we do away with that? Now, I didn't. I mean,
Done away with? Is that the question?
I have a recollection.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll rely on my recollection too. There's actually a version prior to this one. And the version prior to this one had a very complicated hearing system run by the city attorney with hearing officers, and the few times there was an attempt to use it, it was primarily political, and it ended up being creating many more problems than it solved. And so the next step was, by that council at that time, was let's take out that hearing process, but left in all of the other language about what the potential were. And then I think the discussion was simply, well, look, we can, if the council has the ability to do that anyway, what do we need it for? That it doesn't add anything to the process. It's not code of ethics, it's disciplinary. And so the majority of the council at that time thought, okay, let's leave it the way it is. That's pretty simple.
We were told to go to hell. I mean, basically, we tried to enforce it, and that council person just said, knock yourself out. Yeah. Ultimately, it's the voters that put me in, and the reason it was prompted was because that council person was diametrically opposed to the mission of the council putting together projects. You were there. And when we tried to sanction him, and when we tried to quiet him, and when we tried to get him to say, look, it's a 4-1 vote, I'm sorry, you're on the wrong end, he was working against us. And when we finally tried to employ those sanctions, he just said, go to hell. And ultimately, the fact is, ultimately, we want, right now there's a movement, and I keep saying this, to flip how we were operated as a government. The voters, if they don't like something that a council person says, I mean, all this other stuff is laid out very, very clearly. But if the voters don't like something a council person says, it's the voters that have to remove that person. And, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, there's many times when I have heard council people say things that I absolutely disagree with, and I think they actually are doing damage. But not once have I thought to myself they should be removed. I mean, even the problem children that we had when I first got on council, it never occurred to me. Now, one of the weapons we had was we didn't allow them to be mayor because, again, we utilized that because we needed to have somebody representing a specific project. Later on, and I was quoted in social media, if you recall, and Robin and Greg were both on council at the time, part of the reason I was against putting some of these in place is we were appointing somebody to EDAC. That morning there were 2 applications. One of the applicants vilified in writing the other applicant. And they also had previously been against all kinds of projects. And so they were trying to say, once we didn't select them, because we got to have somewhat of a team, we subsequently, they called for a whole ethics violation because, gee, since they aced the other person out by negative comments, they should have been appointed. Well, somehow we had violated the ethics. And so my comment stemmed from, well, and you actually try as a council person not to diss a resident, so you can't always tell the whole story by saying totally out of line. But the problem is that it does become a political weapon. A lot of people's ideas are in the eye of the beholder. And I think a lot of the things that are here are absolutely perfect. But ultimately, if a council person says something that I don't like or residents don't like, it's the residents must take care of it. And I want to, I mean, since I've started blabbing, a couple of things I want to point out. I am totally willing to go with the ethics of the State Assembly and the State Senate. Guess what? They don't have one. So stop telling me that I have to judge a sitting council person, particularly when I happen to know that there's not one council person sitting up here right now that has ever said anything I don't like it, but I'm actually proud to serve with every single council person on this dais. There's not one I'm not proud to serve with. So now if they say something stupid, I'm supposed to look at them and say, bad. I can't remove him. I can't do anything to her, him, or whatever. I also, I'm a great believer in the First Amendment. Just because you're a council person doesn't mean you don't get to voice your opinion. And unfortunately, we live in an age where people's opinions are twisted horribly. I mean, some of the stuff people say is so stupid. Oh, that person said this, and they meant this, and they caused this. And none of it's true. It's actually imbecilic what they're trying to get people to believe. And then the other thing, Thomas Jefferson once said that fake speech is corrected by true speech. So what I would hope is if somebody really doesn't like what one of us say, if I remember, please call in, please write letters, please stand at the podium, and you have to do your job. My job is to make sure I fill potholes, have police, have fire. My job isn't to take the role of the voter. You can always use a recall, which I don't recommend because, quite honestly, we have a history of recalls and it sets back the city years. Historically, when you do a recall, even if it's valuable, which I don't think any of them ever have been, literally it sets us back because the entire city literally comes to a halt. But that is an option. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Robin, but what it becomes is if you go with that, you get pressure. If you have a bunch of rules, people then take those rules and they go, well, he violated your rules. Well, maybe, maybe not. And so that's why we just kind of, I mean, how do you enforce it? Right now in Riverside, City of Riverside, they have a councilwoman who is in deep trouble. They're doing stuff, censoring, and she's quite brave. I'm pretty impressed. She says, do what you will. The voters put me here, and the voters are going to remove me. I mean, I really admire that. That's tough. So that's kind of the backstory to all of this. Catherine, do you have anything?
I do. Thank you for asking.
Sorry to go on.
No, you're fine. So when I look at this code of ethics, I think of the future of our city. And I think of those who will be sitting in our chairs when we're gone. It's not always going to be us up here. And the requirements to get elected to public office are that you're 18 and you live in Norco, and you win. Public servants are held to higher standards, and I think that we should be. We're role models in our community, and we are tasked with hard conversations and difficult decisions. Our job as elected officials is political in nature. There's no way to get away from the politics of the job. And I think that we're also setting the example for future council members in thinking again of our future, of our city. And if public trust is broken, who will hold us accountable? I believe that it is our job to hold each other accountable, and accountable in meaning taking responsibility for our actions. Could anything be used as a political weapon when you're in politics? Yes. And I'm not talking about First Amendment, free speech issues. I think as council members, we faced some restrictions that the general public doesn't because of our position. I feel, should be more careful about the things that I say because they have ramifications because of the office that I hold. That doesn't mean that I cannot disagree or that I cannot debate policies or positions or have differences of opinion, and I welcome those. And I think those are the hard conversations that we're tasked with having. But if we only rely on the public or an election to hold us accountable, are we really setting an example for our community and for future council members moving forward? I think trust is really the basis of government. And how do we have policies? We're the policy-making body. How do we have policies that promote public trust? That's definitely the goal that I have, and I think all of us probably have, right? We want to do a good job for our residents. We want to set a good example. We want to solve problems. We want to make sure, all the parts of our city are working as they should. So I want to second what Councilmember Grunmeyer said about, if we just have this document and it's nice and we hope everyone holds to it, does it mean as much as it could? And I understand there are absolutely concerns, and I think the devil's always in the details of what that would look like. But I think it's worth, I'm glad we're having the discussion in terms of, it's hard to hold each other accountable. It's hard to be responsible, for our actions. But, in the trainings that I've gone to as a new council member, that's one of the big things they talked about. We have to do that for each other, and we have to be willing to do that. And again, I think about our future. I think about who will be here when we're gone, and are we setting the example, for our residents and for future council members.
So the question is, how do you do that? And just practically speaking, Greg and I sat through hundreds of meetings, and I don't think I would want to follow the example of those councils. In many ways, we kind of run for that. I mean, aren't we? I mean, if somebody, God forbid, turns out to be a pedophile, something like that, obviously we would step in and we would do whatever it took. But even then, it would take a lot to remove that person. And ultimately, we have our one powerful vote, but ultimately the power to remove a sitting council person. And I know there's a large segment of the population, and they are wrong. They will destroy this country. You cannot have elected officials who are screaming at elected officials or segments of the population through screaming to remove sitting council people. The only way to do it is to lobby, work, get together, and find a candidate to remove or outvote, just as every person did here, to find a constituency to get rid of that person. That is the fundamental foundation of this country. That is fundamental, which is why our election system has to be perfect. Because without that, we really are lost. But if you have an idea of how we could, as a council, circumvent the voters, and I'm serious, what would be what would be the list of things that we would say, okay, we want you to leave, we want you to go? What is there a list, or what would it, just practically, what would you see that to be?
I would just say I'm not suggesting removing anyone from council, but there are a number of
Just one comment is the council doesn't have the authority, obviously, to remove any council member. It's all the things that are short of that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they're looking at kind of what some other cities do or don't do, because this varies in cities. There are things, and again, I'm thinking of the future, if there were things, because you can't remove somebody, right, unless they were to resign or to lose an election. But are there things that we want to have in place to be able to hold people accountable, to be able to protect that city, that are through a more formal process than, in the instance of, one of the things that was listed was removal from the mayor rotation, which it sounds like that's something that was done. Or I just think that it's worth looking at, do we want anything as a way to hold each other accountable, to show the public, hey, if one of our elected officials is violating this code of ethics, is doing egregious things, we're willing to take action. We're willing to do that. We will do that because we love our city, because we care about our city, and because we want to set a good example. And so what that looks like, yes, as I said, the devil's in the details. I think there's a number of things you can do, or one thing. Before it was one thing, and it was public censure, which is just a rebuke. It's just saying, hey, we as a council don't agree with the actions that happened. And that's it. Other city councils, might remove people. Will remove people from commissions, or they'll, not send them to conferences or what have you. But I think the idea, where I'm coming from, is that idea of public trust, that the public trusts that if we had a council member who was in need of being held responsible, that we could and would be willing to do it, even though it would be a difficult thing to do.
Can we public censure right now? We as a council could actually censure someone.
Oh, yeah, there's censure isn't statutory, obviously.
Right, it's California state law.
Censure. I don't want to really get too much involved in the discussion, but all the things that are listed, for example, in Riverside, are something that a council can do, whether they're printed there or not. You have the ability to remove somebody as mayor pro tem, assigned to committees, stop travel. You can do all those things now by a majority vote of the council. And the question is whether or not you want to list those as potential alternatives, I guess, in a code of ethics.
And even then, we've had commissioners that have spearheaded recall efforts, and yet council reappointed them to commissions. You still are only one vote in a sea of 5 votes.
You're going to skip me again, Kevin?
Yeah, Greg?
Go ahead, get Greg then.
I guess after that, I'm making the assumption we all finished our ethics training here recently. I know I did. I only missed 2 questions.
You know what? I make a motion we censure Greg Newton.
Well, the two I missed, honestly, were the ones that I rethought because I was thinking of John's advice. So I corrected myself. You know, part of this, and I do have some housekeeping issues that we have in our current guidelines, is that back in 2013 or whenever that was, there was such more hostility with some of the members, and that dynamics have changed, whether it's on council or in the public. Part of it, I think, we'll wait to the social media portion of this, but you know, you'll always see the one social media warrior that goes, yeah, council members, they're just lining their pockets. You know, we got paid off for this or paid off for that. And I would, no, it wasn't. I mean, a lot of that, John, it's common sense. And I would venture to guess 99.9% of the residents in this town would never honestly even consider that. And I would never consider that with anybody on council or staff. It's just not my way of thinking. And you know, so I think there's just a different dynamic than what we've had in the past. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, I'm sorry, just let me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Let him finish.
No,
Sorry,
let Ted
Greg.
finish, but I just want to
No,
say
go
I
ahead,
had a
Greg.
couple
Finish
of
it up.
I'm
Finish it
sorry,
up.
Greg. My fault. My fault.
It was just, whatever we change on here, just housekeeping wise, on page 3, under bottom of the page, it was city count, and it says number 1, city council. This is in our current policy. Letter A, if someone believes, and I highlight it like if someone. Is there a different term or word, or is that the correct? Who's a someone? And then just a little further down, and so yeah, someone, and then a committee shall be formed consisting of deputy city manager / director of finance. I think we could take out director of finance now. Or I'm sorry, I had it as the current one.
Which one do you want?
Yeah, that's the one that was changed because
The 13,
that turned
the
out
last?
to be an absolute nightmare.
Okay.
That's
All
when
right.
you have the city attorney and city
Then I'm sorry.
manager telling the
But is
council
that
what to
changed
do.
in that policy?
The policy doesn't.
Yeah, it's the policy. Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Administrative policies and procedures is supposed to align with the city council adopted code of ethics. Unfortunately, when the change was made in 2013, we didn't go back and make the necessary revisions to the administrative policies and
Right.
procedures.
And I think that's what the staff report says.
Okay, that's
Okay.
contained in the staff report.
So am I wrong, or?
You're wrong that that's theoretically the administrative policy, but it's inconsistent with the adopted code of
Okay.
ethics. And so the
I'm-
staff report indicates that whatever you do, you're going to have to go back, unless you go back to the original version, you're going to have to
All right.
make modifications to the administrative policy.
That's all my comment is to the administration
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah.
Just cleanup. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Greg. Ted?
Yeah. And when you look at this, and Catherine's right, what's going to come up in the future? When this was developed in 2013, and now this is 2021. So we're here looking at a whole different ballgame 8 years later. And times have changed. I listened to some of this thing was going on in 2013, sitting here going, wow. And he was right. And the councilwoman in Riverside's right. What are you going to do? You know, you worry about what you're going to do in the future. of this. As we go through, and we're going to get into the other thing with social media, but not only social media, but things have changed. Perceptions have changed of what's going on. People are quick to make decisions in responses, not reaching out. And that's even evident today. We have a state senator that had to put a bill in right now. Currently, it's up in Sacramento because they want to add political affiliations to the same thing we're talking about, the ethics and the housing, because people are being picked on because of their political affiliations. This is Senator Melendez. She had to add that in there because of the bullying being done, because of what party you belong to. This is a sad reflection on why we have to do this. But it has to be done because of this cancel culture that is essentially hitting us. They didn't have cancel culture back when you guys were in council back then, but it's there. And that's reality. And if you're not going to face reality, that's what it is. There are political processes to remove a member of this council. And basically it's every 4 years. It's called an election. In between, if the citizens don't want it, it's ethics. It's a recall. They want to get recall, fill the papers out and recall them. This council, they don't want somebody to do it. Guess what? John's correct. You don't get to go to any of the, we're not going to fund you to be on, or we're not going to have you sit on a commission or a board or a committee. You essentially restricted from what they can do. And that's how it's done. But that means the rest of you have to pick up on that workload. And don't believe that that person, or if it's persons, won't come back to haunt you. Because those decisions will come back to haunt you. And what's going to happen is you create a council that is adversary towards each other. Because it will happen. And we saw it. You said over on the end, and there was a lot of 4-1 votes. And so that's one thing, when you start looking at this thing and trying to put together enforcement teams or what we're going to do, how we're going to censor this, you got to understand that there are 14,000 registered voters in this town. And 14,000 registered voters made the decision to put the 5 of us up here. And that's who we answer to. As far as what a person says or does, I'm going to back the First Amendment. There's a thing, and John, it's called the Brandenburg test. Supreme Court uses. It's approved. It determines what's right free speech. If you're not familiar with it, I suggest you look it up. Because it qualifies what you can and can't say within reason under the First Amendment. Mr. Brandenburg was a KKK member in a rally. They tried to get him for a free speech violation. And they didn't. The Supreme Court said no, and he said it's fine. And that's what you have. That's in there. And that's a test you should use whenever you want to go after some person or persons. That's a free speech. Tells you what it is. But to enforce it, we're all up here equal. We all have one vote. It would be unfair to have one council member vote against another council member or try to censor that council member. And I bring this up, and you look at the future. If the city has to go to districts in the near future, you censor that council person? Are you going to, you just censored 5,000 voters in that person's, his or her district's ability to function. Is that fair to those voters and those residents? It's not. We're up here. There's 5 people. I don't care what council it is. There's 5 different people. Basically, we come from 5 different backgrounds, if you look at it. We all 5 of us, say, for example, we had 5 different political affiliations. We had 5 of us had 5 different types of religious backgrounds. We'd be 5 different races or creeds. It doesn't matter. 5 people have to work together for the residents of this community, the 26,000 people that live here. So ethics, you leave that up to the voters. We can continue with this. There shouldn't be any enforcement rules. It's self-enforcing. We go to a class. The state mandates we go to a class every 2 years in ethics. No, let the voters decide. That's what they're for. If they don't like us, trust us, they'll tell us, and they'll be up here real quick. So, that's all I got to say.
I got the same emails that Robin got, and for me, it actually had an effect, and I suspect it had an effect on all of us, in that you go, oh, okay, I need to curb this, or I need to change that behavior. So even if you don't get an apology or you don't get a resignation, my experience has been is when I got 41 emails and phone calls, and my experience is that those are behavior change. Those will change behavior, which is how the system is supposed to work. Anybody else have something to say, or is there a
Public
motion?
comments?
Would you like to go to public comments, Mayor, this time?
Before we do that, I want to make sure everybody on the heels of what. Okay, so.
How much of this is, because Ted, I'm taking some of yours and maybe I'm not listening correctly, is statements that people make. And I think ethics are, at times probably all said things that we've regretted, but this seems to be more of your moral composition and how you conduct yourself, and not so much as far as freedom of speech or anything like that. So is there something I'm missing in what I'm reading here under like ethical considerations? It's how we're working for the residents. I'm looking at Robin going, am I not communicating this well, or?
No, I agree with you, and I think, as we're looking at this and we look at the social media policy, I think in our culture today there's a tendency to blur the lines, and that I believe you are correct that the ethics is separate from statements and or the social media policy that we'll look over later. So just for the sake of conversation and those that might want to call in, when we look at ethical considerations, they're listed on the 2013-01, so I'll just read them for the public. Number 1, comply with the law. Number 2, work for the common good. Number 3, conduct of city council members, commission members, and employees should be professional, and it has a description there. Respect for the process. It has considerations that you should not use city employment or facilities for personal gain. You should make decisions based on merit. You should keep confidential information confidential. You should avoid conflicts of interest. You should advocate for official policies and positions of the city to the best of your ability. You should help to create a positive work environment. You should not discriminate or harass. And that the last provision is that this particular ethics code is self-enforced. So, I don't think that the ethics code, the way there's no problem, in my opinion, with the ethics code the way it is. I think it's pretty standard verbiage across many of the other codes that I've read. I think a big part of having this discussion is so that our residents know we have one. There were several residents that wrote with the concern that didn't think we had a code of ethics. And like I had mentioned before, it took me a little while to find the code of ethics. So I think we're valuing, those emails and concerns that we got by having the discussion, to be honest with you, and letting people know that we were listening and we're willing to have this discussion. And I think where we're probably going to have the hardest time is, is there enforcement and sanctions or not? I personally am not a fan of this huge section that says enforcement and sanctions. I personally would rather have it say something like accountability, or, something like that. But if that's the decision of the council to have something there. I also think that fundamentally, like many people up here have said, we're here and we were put here by the constituents. And the only way you're going to be removed is by those same constituents. And a frustration for me that has come up is the demands for rebuke or demands for removal or demands for certain actions. I have a problem with that. And we received several demands over the course of discussion over, I would just say since July. And it's really important to me to take into consideration that we represent every single person in this community, and that demanding a behavior or demanding that something be done that is outside of the character for me personally, I won't do it. So if you demand for me to rebuke somebody, I will tell you right now, that will never happen. That is not in my character, and that is not within the system of beliefs that I have. And the constituents of Norco should know that that's how I operate, and that's my system of beliefs, and that they elected me to represent them as a whole package, including those beliefs and how I treat people and what I will and won't do. And so I want to rebuild the trust, like Councilmember Alleman has said, but I also think we need to help shift the culture and shift how people interact with each other and shift the way we work through disagreements and conflict. Because what has been modeled in social media, on the news, on talk shows, that's not the way I resolve conflict. That's not the way I want my children to resolve conflict. And it's certainly not the way that I want to model conflict resolution to the young people I stand in front of every day. And so if this is the first step in awareness and a culture shift, then that's great. But there's just been so much happen, not only here in Norco, just across our country, that, I don't know how the conversation starts. I don't know how we get to a point where we can have a conversation. I think it's gotten to such a point where people aren't even willing to have a conversation anymore. And that's not okay. And so I'm just glad we're having the conversation, and we're doing it with respect and honesty and transparency for our residents.
On that note, do we have any people calling in? Opening public comments?
Now is the time to dial in for public comment for item 5A pertaining to the Code of Ethics. You'll be placed in a queue, and your call will be answered in the order received. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please dial in now at 951-582-5557. Thank you. Have we had any callers call to the queue? Mayor, there's no callers in the queue. I do have one email that has just arrived.
All right.
Dear Norco City Council, the citizens of Norco deserve to know that our elected officials are held to the highest standard. We deserve to be able to hold our officials accountable for their actions without having to wait until their term is up or attempting to recall. It has been made abundantly clear time and time again that a recall election would be too expensive for our city. But if there is no other way to hold a council member accountable, then eventually that is a route someone might take. Therefore, I ask that you include a form of enforcement in the Code of Ethics. It is my opinion that forming a City Board of Ethics committee to review formal complaints of violations similar to that of the City of Riverside would be the most fair option. However, other neighboring cities have different forms of enforcement that should be considered and discussed. Sincerely, Maggie D. And I have no further comments, Mayor.
Okay, closing public comments. Any comments? Robin?
I think just for the sake of conversation, as a new council person comes on, they may or may not know or understand those options that are available already for enforcement of a code of ethics that were mentioned by our city attorney. And so I'm just wondering if, for the sake of anyone, a new council member, a new commissioner, a new city employee, or our residents as a whole, to somehow just list on the current code of ethics, these are potential methods of, I don't know what it would be called, but these are the things that can be done for those members of council or commissions that do not follow the code of ethics, because they already exist. We've been told they exist, and they're already there for use. Skipping somebody as the mayor, which we know takes place in December when we reorganize. The person could be not voted in, or, you know, take them off a committee again, which there are steps to do that. But if they can just be listed so that folks know these are options without having to go to another set of regulations or another place in the code or wherever you would find that information typically.
If you wanted to add that.
Can you talk into your microphone a little bit closer? Yeah. Thank you, John. I'm sorry. We're getting complaints, as you know.
I'll just say, if you look at the 01, where enforcement sanctions, which you probably strike that, but it's the intention of that the code of ethics be self-enforcing. However, it's recognized that there may be instances after receiving guidance in council, a person may continue to violate the code's provisions. In those cases, then say potential sanctions might include, and the list essentially is, I think, City of Riverside's list, which is public apology by the official, recommendation for training, removal from regional committees, removal from mayor pro tem rotation, public censure, or restriction from traveling or attending meetings. That as a practical matter is all you could do anyway.
We can already do that.
Oh, yeah, that's what,
we
yes.
can remove any commissioner. We can remove.
Yes. No, my only comment is in response to Robin's suggestion. If you wanted to follow her suggestion, that'd probably be the way to do it. If you don't want to have even the suggestion that they're potential, then that's what you're there for.
Kevin?
Yeah.
if I'm a little leery about writing down those things, because those are expectations. If you put them on there, and then you're leaving yourself out, or you're creating an enforcement that actually, instead of redoing the self-enforcement type of a situation, you're actually setting up a whole series of things that a governing board can do to a person, rather than if you leave it open and leave it out, things will develop to where you can do that. I'm leery about putting out, just like you said, these are things that we have to do, or these are understood. There are certain things that are understood as council members when they get up here. It's just like anything else. But if you try to write that stuff down, someone along the line is going to use that, and that's how you're going to challenge, and that's how you're going to end up having you're going to end up breaking up or splitting up a council. You know as well as I do, there are things that are understood. John knows, and the attorneys, there's ethics that if you screw up, there's things you understood. You're going to lose your license to practice, okay? And they're understood, but they're not a list of things that are there.
For what it's worth, we're kind of using ethics in a much broader sense than what this does. That the real statutory, there are ethical obligations. That class you took was 2 hours in explaining to you what the law is, and the things that common sense is. Greg says that if you take money from a developer, or you vote in favor of one of your friends, or I guess friends, okay, in favor of one of your family members, those things are purely economic, financial conflicts, and that's the only thing that the statute addresses is economic conflicts. This addresses things that are more like yelling at somebody who comes to the podium, and those types of things that are more behavior oriented than they are, as Robin said, the attempted resolution of conflict. And I think my recollection is that the reason that it was removed from the prior, the 01, was because of concerns that kind of what Ted says, that there would say, okay, well, we know you violated this now, council, you have an obligation to punish for it. I mean, that's what it was treated as punishment. That's one of the reasons why it ultimately went away, I think. At least that was the argument.
That was exactly why it went away, because it actually was being used by residents to do that. I mean, their interpretation of, well, why aren't you guys doing something?
Yeah. In addition, of course, and I mean, this is going to be true no matter what you do, that the folks that are complaining that there were ethical violations really probably haven't read the Code of Ethics, because it doesn't address things like, well, you supported this candidate for president or this candidate for president, or you like guns or you don't like guns. That doesn't have anything to do with the Code of Ethics for a city.
Sort of, Robin, I'm glad you said what you said, because there's something I can't do, and I can't do it. I'm linked to a generation that is catching a lot of hell right now unfairly, but those are people that literally, and this is dramatic, storm beaches, died so that people could stand at that podium and yell at every one of us, and could get together and do the work to change the direction of the entire government. And I can't accept somebody who says it's too hard to do a recall. No offense to that person. It's too hard to get the constituency. Right now, we're going to lose our country because people are standing on doorsteps lying to uninformed voters to capture their ballot. We're doing that. in the name of everybody gets to vote. That's ridiculous. You will lose your government. If you want to remove a council person, you have to do what every single person on this dais has done. You gather people together and you fight, cajole, argue, find a way to get enough people, a majority of some kind, to change what you want to change. You don't get to just say, well, I want you to go over there and tell that guy he's really bad, and because it's too much money and too hard to get the signatures. Greg and I were going to be recalled over change of fire department. Remember? They were going to recall us because, we had that whole group of people saying, we can't lose our fire department. So should other council people, in fact, one of them would have. He would have censured us. I was almost, they talked about recalling me for Silver Lakes. And there was another council person that if he could have censured me, he would have censured me. So what's the criteria? But in the meantime, voters have to be informed. They have to know there are the rules that we already have in place, but they have to do the work, just like we all did. I sat in hundreds of meetings, lobbying, fighting, having to learn, making mistakes. Ted did, Robin did, Catherine, poster child. Greg the same way. Never once did I hear, gee, that person needs to do this or the council needs to do that. They got a constituency and they fought like hell. And I can't accept that it gets to be easy. So, again, as always, Robin, you're opening that truthfulness. It's important. Nobody is going to, you know what? You don't get it for free. And people better wake up. They better wake up because stupid things are happening. Personally, and I'm going to say this, I have heard nobody say anything that would cause me to vote to remove them from a sitting position on this council. No one. And I disagree at times with every single person on this council. So, is there any other discussion? Is there a change we want to make? Is there something, Ted?
I just have one, and only for clarification, because we're looking at, in our staff report, 3 different deals. So the one that's actually effective is the one dated May 15, 2013. Correct. Okay. So if you look at, actually they're all 2013-01, and they're all so. But it's the one that's dated May 15, 2013. Okay.
Any changes that we want to make to the current code that we're following? I think that it's a great idea that we let people know there is a code of ethics for certain things, but do we have a motion to change anything?
Dana, just for clarification, if Resolution 2013-21, if we take no action, that one stands, and then however, the administrative policy statement would just be updated,
Would
correct?
be updated to correlate with 2013-21.
The administrative policies and procedures statement is an operational statement and is intended to be administrative. The code of ethics stands as is. There isn't any, we don't actually have to adopt administrative policies and procedures because that necessarily doesn't have to apply to City Council. You have the code of ethics that applies to City Council. The administrative policies and procedures in this case to conform it essentially to match what the code of ethics says doesn't add additional value. As far as the application of employees that may not follow the code of ethics, the enforcement or the accountability related to that is prescribed by the city's personnel rules and regulations. So I guess what I'm saying in that sense is that there isn't any need to do anything with this as far as the city council is concerned.
With the exception of, because of this, the administrative procedure does apply to city council members. So the enforcement and sanctions provision is inconsistent with, because it sets up that system.
Well, what I'm saying is this is already repealed, so doesn't exist.
We don't have to repeal it at this time.
John, be sure to talk into your mic, please.
Yeah, council doesn't take any action with regard to the administrative policy. That's why it's administrative policy.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So do we have any actions we want to take, or? I don't hear a motion. Yeah, please.
Let me be transparent here. I was commenting, I liked Robin's suggestion.
Okay. What is your suggestion?
Well, mine was the one that that we can, just for the sake of residents, list some of the potentials and/or new council members, some of the potential sanctions. But I also understand the discussion that you and Ted brought up, where that could be
Divisive.
very divisive, and I think misinterpreted potentially by residents, how you guys mentioned in your discussion. So to maybe resolve that particular issue, and I'll be honest with, I went to look to see if the code of ethics was in places where it was stated that it is, and it's not everywhere that it's stated that it was. We just need to do a better job as folks are elected to council to make sure that all of this is getting in front of potential candidates for council, that it's getting in front of new council members in a timely manner that's appropriate and interactive, I guess, so that there's a real understanding. It's ironic that I'm going to say this, but sitting in front of a computer for 2 hours to learn, your mandated ethics is not, in my opinion, the best way to go about making sure that that's done. However, that's the way we all do it, and that's what we're doing with our children right now, too. So we need to look at how we are integrating new people into commission positions, into council positions, so that these things, that our city attorney talks about, are things that are known and understood. I just feel like, again, given the nature of discourse and the way things are going right now, that potentially listing some of these, it is going to be.
It has actually happened, Robin.
It's divisive. But I also want folks to know that there is a level of accountability. So I see both sides of the discussion, and I'm not sure what the right answer is to make it work.
Well,
so,
what if you just, I don't have a problem leaving it with the explanations. Just this sheet to somehow maybe, without the flotsam and jetsam, just list the ethical considerations, comply with the law, conduct of city council members. That's all pretty. There's certain things already just in this. If you use city employment and facilities for personal gain, John, you've been around long enough. You've seen people removed for that stuff. They end up, people go nuts and they get removed.
And generally that's a crime.
It's a crime.
helps.
A lot of it's I mean, that's what I mean. A lot of this stuff is a crime.
Yeah.
And unless you're a congressman. How would that work, Robin, if you just made sure that this code of ethics resolution is made available?
Yeah, and I think us having this discussion and having it will rise to the top on the city website, and it will be much easier to find, and it's going to be accessible, and people will be able to read it. So that's why if we say, yes, we agree with this and it's going to stay, I'm fine with that. And again, if people watch this meeting later or read the minutes and they're not happy, then, let us know again and we can sit and have a conversation about it, or we can have a discussion. And, and the other thing is, I think a lot of folks have put some of this into practice fairly recently with, again, the things that are going on. Why don't we see what does the process look like in other jurisdictions, that have put some of these into place? I know, again, the few blips that I've seen on the news, it's not always effective or appropriate. And so, if what we have will work, and we all know that we have it now, and we know what, accountability we can hold each other to, then I think that's the first step in moving forward.
All right. What do you think, Catherine? Yeah, Greg?
I just hate
That's censure number 2.
I mean, we're referring back to just council members, and I just want to bring up, it's also commission members. And then historically, yes, we've had a couple of issues with council members, and we're held at a different level, but we've had more problems with commission members than we have had with council members. And Alma knows that very well. Okay. Especially one commission. But that's just kind of my 2 cents, that yes, we're the elected official, but I think it's beholden on us, we really need to be careful on who we appoint to commissions.
In the 80s and 70s and 60s, there were incidents where, where entire commissions were removed because the council went, "What are you people doing? You're crazy." And they just said, "All of you are fired." That's why a lot of cities go to, each one of you gets your own commissioner to appoint, so that you can't fire the other 4 commissioners who might agree with you.
Yeah, unfortunately, crazy tends to be in the eye of the beholder.
Well, I think this discussion was very good, and it sort of exemplifies the difficulties that we all face today. Any other suggestions, motions, comments?
You need a I would like to recommend that we stay with Resolution 2013-21.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton?
Yes.
Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
We'll now take a 5-minute break. Good job. back into session.
But they didn't adopt it, so, yeah.
Moving on to 5D, review of City of Norco's administrative policy number 112, social media. City Clerk?
Actually,
I will make the report on this
okay.
one, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
So the City Council requested for this item to be brought back to the City Council for review. This is city's administrative policy number 112, social media. A couple of things I want to note with respect to this policy. This is an administrative policy issued by the city manager. It was not approved, did not come to the City Council for adoption. Although the newly elected council members, or when it was adopted, the Human Resources Department has made it a practice of having city council members receive a copy and acknowledge receipt of a copy. Now, as an administrative policy issued by the city manager, I don't have any ability to enforce any of the provisions in this document against any council member. Okay? And with respect to where this applies, this is really about the behavior of city employees when it comes to their engagement on social media, their own private social media behavior. This does not deal with how we use the city's own social media platforms to engage Norco residents or the public. So again, the only reason this is before you is that you asked for it to be brought to the City Council. So with that, I guess I believe it at that is really up to the City Council to decide if they want to adopt their own social media policy or be bound by the social media policy that is already this one that exists, which is issued administratively. And additionally, if you want to be bound by it, are there changes that you like to see be made to the document as it currently exists?
And one other comment, kind of based upon a sidebar that I had with Robin during the break, that maybe a flip from what I said, that maybe if you're concerned about those issues, that what you need to do is make it clear in the Code of Ethics that it applies to use of social media as well. And maybe that's a simpler way of going about it than trying to develop a separate policy. And I think everything that makes sense in that context. It's because it's really communication, and all this social media is just a different form of communication.
Robin, your motion.
Again, this was brought forward primarily for the same reason as the Code of Ethics, and so that our residents would know what currently exists within the city. And again, it's an administrative policy, and to bring it up again for discussion. If I think about just the changes in social media in general in the last couple of years, how this is gonna make me sound so old, like MySpace, and then Facebook, and then Snapchat, and now there's TikTok, and this and that, and all of these things. It's ever changing, and I think to make a policy that can keep up with just the rate of that would be very difficult. So I do like the idea of just maybe putting in a clause in the Code of Ethics that applies to social media platforms in a general sense would be appropriate. I was given a copy of this as a newly elected council member, and I think the provisions in the administrative policy are fair. And one thing, and I'll just say it kind of goes along with some of the things that have been said up here. As an elected official, I do believe we are held to a higher standard. It's not okay for us to do certain things or act in certain ways or say certain things. I would also argue I'm growing weary of the First Amendment argument, not in the sense of that we have a First Amendment. I'm growing weary of the First Amendment being a defense of not being a good person. It's still not okay to tell lies. It's still not okay to be derogatory to other people for reasons of political affiliation or religious beliefs or we can list a whole myriad of things. And, as we move forward in discussions and, again, making a shift in culture, and I realize it is a free country. You can, you don't have to be nice to other people. You don't have to be kind. But I just would hope that we look and kind of reflect on, as we're talking about these things, at the end of the day, we still need to be kind. We still need to be open and appropriate in our communications and transparent, and just know that, when we signed on the line that we would put our name on a ballot, that we should have known you give up a certain amount of your privacy. You give up a certain amount of your ability to kind of say, what you want. And again, because I represent everyone in this community, and I know I've been accused of, well, she's too middle of the road, or she doesn't say, how things really are. And again, we can have those discussions, but I'm trying to be mindful and act in a way that I want to be treated and how I feel all of our residents should be treated. And I'm having a hard time articulating it, but I'll just give an example. The last 2 weeks or so, I have been inundated with some of the most nasty emails I've had in my entire time of service. And they're not quote unquote directed at me. I would say they're just people that are frustrated and angry with the process or whatever the case may be. But they're mean and they're nasty, and they include profanity and accusations. And I think this goes to this culture that's been created on social media. I'm sitting behind a keyboard and I'm typing this thing to Robin, and I want her to know I'm mad and I want her to know I'm frustrated. But I can guarantee if that person was sitting in front of me and we were having the conversation face to face, it's certainly not the way the conversation would go. And so I work very hard on responses and modeling, again, the behavior and the kind of responses and input that I would want from our residents. But I just want us to, and again, it's just such a monumental task. I want us to make a shift in Norco and in our culture. You don't have to be mean and nasty to each other. You don't have to make these divisions. And I can remember even when I started on council, this room, you could tell where people were at by what side of the room they sat on, and
we've taken care of that.
Yeah, we don't have that anymore. And the ironic part of it for me is anytime there's an issue or anytime there's something where, Norco is somewhat threatened, all of these people come together and help each other. And so that's the kind of culture thing that I want us to kind of bring back and to foster. And, you know, I do believe that our behavior on social media, I believe that city staff's behavior on social media, all of us, that contributes to what that culture of Norco can be. And so, again, it's mostly for discussion and to bring it up so that we can let folks know there is an administrative policy. There are some things in place. We all attended the League of Cities conference virtually. They had an outstanding presentation on social media and how it can be used by elected officials and by city governments. And I learned a tremendous amount of ideas and things like that on that conference that were valuable. And I think the other part that residents need to know is social media. There are strict rules even now for elected officials where use of social media could be Brown Act violations. So not could, they are. Certain things are Brown Act violations now, even on social media. And so there's another level of accountability that your elected officials are held to that most people probably don't even know. If, you know, Kevin was to post today that, oh, I think I'm leaning this way on, you know, our social media policy, and I hit the like button.
Oh man, I got to take that off right now.
I violated the Brown Act just by doing that. And so there are measures in place for your elected officials already because of the Brown Act. So it's just for discussion. And I signed the administrative or received the administrative policy. I think it's fair and appropriate. I don't know that it needs any updates according to, you know, the training that we've had at the League of Cities, but that's my 2 cents.
Greg, you seconded it.
I'll remember not to second any motions from now on. Like,
see, this is how we get council people just like this. You just put them on the spot.
Or not show up. I kind of like the suggestion of moving this over to our ethics. Just kind of looking at the administrative policy, and I think this came up with what we saw with League of Cities, like on page 2, the postings on this site are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the city of Norco. My understanding is shouldn't even do that.
That's right.
And
if
right.
she puts the like, doesn't make any difference.
And for the life of me, I never knew if Catherine or Kevin leaned one way and I put a like button and somebody else did the same and that was a Brown Act violation. Never aware of that.
But the good news is it's only been a Brown Act violation since January 1st.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean that.
And I sent you a lengthy opinion on that subject.
Right. So, but once again on the ethics part, I think I bite my tongue a lot on that, on the social media, and you know, just for some very current examples, you know, the issue we had with homelessness, and Kevin, you reached out as mayor, and I thought made a great reply to the residents. And then the city's response also, separate, address that. But Robin, I don't know how you have those people, I don't want to say those people. There's residents out there that just want to stir it up with no solutions and just like, here's the problem the city has. And what are you going to do about it? And I think the city standpoint, and Kevin, you both replied to that very well. And that gets frustrating. I don't reply because I don't see what the upside of that is. Just going to be a character of people that just want to pick a fight and stir it up, and then just sit back and kind of watch it spiral down the toilet. The other thing I wanted to add back also was not only council members, but commissioners. And then we recently had a couple of concerns with different commissioners commenting on social media about different projects. And, you know, how do we handle that also? So
I believe we're talking about the same incident, that was handled by a discussion both in writing and personally with a brand new commissioner who was just trying to be transparent and encourage people to know what was going on at the meetings, but that he now understands.
And I know that. And yeah, I never thought that was malicious, but we've had and have other commissioners that, you know, post their political point of views that have nothing to do with the city, but they're, you know, who am I to judge if it's a hostile view? It strikes me as hostile, but they may do it as, you know, these postings on this site are my own, but you're still perceived as a commissioner.
Yeah, no, once you become a commissioner or city councilman, that doesn't have any application any longer. You are a city council member and you are a commissioner, and whatever you say, the city is going to get some credit or not discredit for, period.
Okay.
There's no way of, oh, well, I'm just saying this is with one notable exception, that if you have a residence and you can comment on a project, but other than that.
Okay. Something will come back to me here.
Yes, I jotted down, I mean, when I received as a new council member the social media policy, I realized that it really was for city employees. As an elected official, the rules are different, right? We're technically not employees, we're elected officials, it's a different sense. But my question was, and I liked Councilmember Grunmeyer's solution, was just what's the connection of social media to that code of ethics, right? I see it as they are connected. That's a way of communicating. And so you could use that social media to violate the code of ethics. I think there's a number of ways that we've kind of discussed, but just to make, what is that connection? How do we make that clear so that we are, you know, holding ourselves to the standard that we should be with our social media as well as our other actions?
Well, this is where I'm going to disagree. When you talk, we just finished with that resolution on ethics, and those are actions. Those are complete what we do. When you talk about social media, that's a specific media, or for lack of a better term, or way of communication now. And what's going to happen, and before we start changing and jumping into this, I think right away we have to look at what's going on, one in Washington and in Sacramento. If H.R. 1 passes and they get that speech czar approved, what we're doing here is mute, because the speech czar says what's right and what's wrong, according to the bill, until the Supreme Court said you can't do that. And then, depending on what happens with SB 238, again, those are including in our deal is the affiliation of a protected class with political affiliations. So before we jump into this, these are going to be changing as we go through. So I'm not really akin to putting social media in there. And when you think about social media, I mean, I'm not going to pick on you, Robin, but there was a recent picture of one of our council persons, okay, we're showing a guy how to do a turkey. Well, I'm not offended by it, but suppose a vegan or somebody that didn't like it was opposed. Next thing you know, they're blasting that cruel punishment. Shouldn't be on the council. Violation, social media. This is what we open ourselves up to. So we have to be very careful how we do this. This council culture's out there. And so before we start making a bunch of specific rules and changes, we have to understand it is there. And we can't give into it. As a veteran, I didn't spend my time in the service to kowtow to them. I'm not going to. John, I take a difference with you. If I put something on social media and I never say what I am, sure, they know I am, but I also be very careful of not putting comment about city business on there. And that's one thing I can, but I still have a right to put things on that are not city related.
Yeah. Don't misunderstand what I said. My only comment to what Catherine indicated was that good, bad, or indifferent, once you become elected to council, whatever you say, even if it's personal opinion, has nothing to do with the city, you're viewed as a city council person, that's all.
They can view me all they want.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm not even suggesting that it would be inappropriate to do it. You're right, yeah. They have that, quote, free First Amendment right to, particularly on non-city stuff. That's one of the reasons why I thought maybe the simple solution would be just to make reference to social media in the Code of Ethics policy, which basically says you're supposed to treat people nicely.
That's fine. I don't want to be specific about it. So we have to be very careful. We're right. Like I said, this isn't Norco 20 years ago.
No.
It's not even Norco 10 years ago. This is a culture that's out there that is looking, and it's an interesting thing, and because these guys write this stuff now to tell you 4 propaganda techniques everyone should know. Activate strong emotions. This is how they tell you to get it. Propaganda plays on human emotions. Fear, hope, anger, frustration, sympathy to direct people towards a desired goal. Propaganda is a mind game. 2, simplify information and ideas. Successful propaganda tells simple stories that are familiar and trusted and often use metaphors, imaginary, repetition, and short phrases to make them seem true and to substitute critical thinking. 3, respond to needs and values, creating effective propaganda that appeals directly to the needs, hopes, fears of specific groups. Makes it personal and relevant, and which can also make people pay attention, absorb information. And 4, attacks opponents. Attacking opponents creates a us versus them mentality, which suppresses the consideration of more complex information and ideas. People are naturally attracted to conflicts, which can serve as a form of political warfare to discredit people or groups. And this is what we've been talking about. And this is exactly what the council culture and social media people do. And they're keyboard warriors out there that will look for anything and everything to attack people. And that's what they do. And this is out there. This is out what the people are being told and taught to do that, and how the groups are doing to attack groups and things that people do. And you may innocently think up there or think that this is my page and I want to do what I want. And you know what? It is my page and I'll do what I want. But as long as I don't discredit the city, that's fine.
Yeah, and essentially I think that's what the modification to the existing Code of Ethics, I think that's all it really addresses, is saying things which don't bring discredit to the city, or the things that you've agreed you should follow philosophically on other than social media. So there's no difference particularly.
Once again, to Robin's point, the tragedy of social media is so many times we want to help. I had an example of a stupid thing, and Sam will appreciate this. A man wrote, he said, oh, they just covered the street with a layer of asphalt. It's all cracking again, like in 2 days. So I read that and I thought, wow. So I called up Chad and I said, Chad, why is it cracking? He goes, it always cracks. What happens is it gets cold, it splits, and then it goes back. I went, oh, really? And I went over, I looked at it. So I put a thing on social media and I said, don't worry, it's going to be fine. I got called a liar. I got called my political affiliations, everything. And guess what? You drive by there in the heat, there ain't no cracks. So I pulled it down. That thing today, I've been working with Andy on that situation on Norconian and getting calls from pastors, and I did that with great trepidation. In fact, I'll probably take it down because Andy surprised me. I asked if he could do a public notice, and I thought, okay, it'll be a couple days, and so I thought, well, I better answer this because we're all getting creamed. And well, he had it out in an hour. And I was like, okay. So I went, gee, I didn't have to do that. But the tragedy of social media is we don't get to really help. They rip us apart. And yet I keep trying. I understand what you're saying about freedom of speech, Robin, but I once stood before a school board that was going to ban Mark Twain. And because of the use of the N-word, when the entire book was about that young boy looking at a African American and saying, we're the same. The whole point of the book was that. But that person, that school board trustee, didn't even read to that point and understand the point of that book. And I just remember sitting there going, how can they be so stupid? Did they not go to 10th grade? So I'm with Ted, but I also, the kindness thing is, because, what people don't understand is at our level, the system is designed for us to be the people's voice. Your senators and assembly people, they don't know what's going on. They don't realize that zoning laws, what happens when they're violated. They don't know what happens when you put 20 ADUs in a neighborhood and all of a sudden you don't have enough police and fire. They don't know that. But us, I think every person up here welcomes, even if you yell at us to our face, but be nice. But we love to hear from you. And when you write us, that's the most effective tool. You don't have to tell me that, get rid of this guy, because I also know enough about council people. You are affected by write to us, talk to us. And the tragedy is the day is coming, if we keep some of the things people are asking us to do, when I'm literally on housing. There's an unbelievable, people don't believe you when you're telling them the truth. They don't want to believe it. And the day is coming when we're all going to sit here and have no power. And when I say power, we won't have the power to help you in your neighborhood. You're going to have to call Senator Roth or Assemblywoman Cervantes. And I'm like Ted, if you have a thing where you have somebody, you already have it in social media. There's a whole bunch of things people are not hearing on social media. And again, I go back to that quote of Jefferson. Fake speech is corrected by true speech. But if you don't say the fake speech, you don't correct. And what happens is people are going to blow up. And that's what I also fear. You keep tamping down people from saying what they feel, it will blow up somewhere else. And I want to have the ability to help people. Again, I keep saying it. We are not a government that rules from the top down. We don't rule from behind barbed wire. We don't rule that way. We govern from the bottom up. And if you take that away from us, then you take away the next level and the next level. And if you take away a person's ability to speak, freedom of speech, understand historically, it didn't happen anywhere else. So, and I'll end with this, and I apologize, but Robin does this to me, and she does it to me every friggin' time. I sit there and I go, God, I get so philosophical. That professor thing in her comes out. I heard a guy once speak, and I've said this before. They're being vilified stupidly. But when all those people went away to World War II, like my mother grew up on a dirt floor. My father grew up in Compton. I mean, these were just regular people who stood in bread lines. And they went away to war, and they went with Jewish, African American, Hispanic, rich, poor, and they beat back an enemy the likes we've never seen. And what they did was they came home and they learned to work together. So I'm in this real weird position where I'm connected to that generation. But the next 2 generations aren't. So they have no concept of exactly what Robin's saying. There's no reason to yell at any of us. We're going to make mistakes. I can guarantee you that every one of us has said things where we go, God, I wish I hadn't said that. I don't need somebody to beat me up over it. So, as elected officials, we're trying to protect you. And we need our voters to protect our ability to protect them. And if you take away our ability to speak, or if every time we go online or talk to you and you beat the hell out of us, we can't help you. And I am confident every person up here and every staff member in this room, in their heart of hearts, they want to help you. They want to make sure, when they want to fix your street, they want to make sure that cop is there. And more than anything, they want to make sure that you have your rights to stand at that podium and say what you think. But if you take ours away, yours is going to be taken away. We're your first line of defense. So I will go with Robin in terms of that. Let's open it to public comments. Anybody willing to speak? You did to me, Robin? Terrible.
Now is the time to dial in for public comment for item 5D regarding social media. You will be placed in a queue and your call will be answered in the order received. Please dial 951-582-5557 now to receive your call. Do we have any callers in the queue? Mayor, we have no callers in the queue at this time, and we have no written public comment either.
Close public comments. Let's close this out. Any suggestions? Robin made one. I would support that with a motion to sort of blend the social media aspect with the other. Is that what your motion? Is that what your? Yeah. Is that a city attorney job? How does that work?
I don't know.
Oh, you mean who does it? Oh, you won't.
Andy?
Won't do it tonight. You're not adopting it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not adopting anything. You come back with.
First of all, we need to understand exactly what that means.
Yeah, Robin, explain it.
We can do the
Well, I think just giving a general overview in the Code of Ethics, or somehow that it applies to
Yeah, I mean, I think it
social
could be
media. I don't think it's
as simple as a one-liner which
Exactly.
says this Code of Ethics applies to the
to-
use of social media as
And-
well as interpersonal communication.
right. Yeah, super. Yeah. I will second the mayor's motion.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, may we have a vote?
Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman? Mayor Pro Tem Newton?
Yes.
Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous.
Moving on to number 6, which is a continued public hearing. That'll be continued to March 17, 2021. Going on to City Council, City Manager, Staff Communications. Sam, anything?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I'd like to make a recommendation to continue public hearing item to City
You're
Council
right.
meeting
You're right.
scheduled for March 17th, 2021.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman? Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Mayor Bash?
Yes, I think you guys need to censure me. It's not my night.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Thank you.
Ask for both. They just asked for opposition.
And I run like 5 of those. Sam, anything? Nothing? Dana?
Nothing tonight, sir. Thanks.
Brian?
Yeah, of course, but it's good news. Okay, so as you know, the state came out February 28th with an order modification related to COVID that would allow youth and adult sports to resume with modifications and guidelines. And what that meant is when the county hit 14 out of 100,000 positive cases on the average, then we could move sports that are technically in the orange tier could move to the purple or red tier. As of yesterday, we hit that number, and so we're all prepping for it, but we've collectively working with our Youth Sports Advisory Council, Silver Lakes groups, and everyone to get started back and putting kids back on the ball fields. There are a lot of rules, but they're all doable, and you can have play. No tournament play at this point in time, but you'll start to see kids back out on the fields practicing scrimmaging under certain guidelines. You'll see masks out there. You'll see coaches wearing masks. So I'll put something out there for everybody, but we meet tomorrow with all of our Youth Sports Council groups, Little League Girls Softball and everybody, and AYSO, and so you're going to start to see that happening very quickly here now. Everybody is very excited. On top of that, we our numbers are improving overall in our average for us to move to the red tier. I do see us hitting those numbers very quickly. We're supposed to be at 14 per 100,000. We're at 10.2 today. So I see us moving. When you start to look at those averages, there's 2 numbers we have to look at to move us into the red tier, but I see that happening within 2 weeks countywide, just based on what we heard today and what those numbers are. So positive all the way as we move to red, and the numbers, the way they're looking, I could see us moving into the orange tier somewhere after maybe Easter. So that's good news.
Great, thanks, Brian. That is good news. Thank you. Matt's buddy. Nothing. Chief, Lieutenant. Chief. Well done today, by the way. Thank you so much for that talk. It was really wonderful. Andy?
Back to what Brian said with respect to the COVID restrictions. I know once in a while we do get questions as to when are we going to open up City Council to the public, or when are we going to open City Hall to the public. So, we keep an eye on this thing, and I, on a bi-weekly basis, participate on a conference call with other city managers in Riverside County. When it comes to actually allowing in-person activities, I think we are one of the most liberal cities. Many cities are still not having city council meetings in person like we do here. Some of them are now beginning to consider going to in-person city council meetings. Many cities have been closed for the entire year as far as city employees coming to city halls to do work. We have essentially, for the most time, have employees at least reporting to work at City Hall, although we have not allowed the public inside City Hall. We did that for a brief period of time when the case load reduced, and then when it spiked up again and the second stay-at-home order was ordered, we went back to not allowing members of the public to City Hall. We're continuing to look at that situation, and Hopefully, if we if we move to the red tier, we take a second look at it. But just be assured that what we are doing here is not something that is different from what many of the cities in Riverside County are doing. In fact, quite to the contrary, we are doing a lot more in-person activities than many cities are doing.
Thank you, Andy. Ted?
Yeah, when the order on February 28th amended equestrian activities, which allows it, some of those activities can move into actually the purple tier. We're working right now with our groups. We will be reopening Ingalls to those two shows and activities. Patty's working on that right now. There are modifications to that, but that will be happening as well. I see us opening it very soon here. Well, yeah, we're still trying to working with the groups to actually put their permits in and do things. We actually had conversation with Jerry Lundy last week and this week about bringing barrels back. There are rules that we have to follow, but you're going to see activity not only on the fields, but you'll see it at Ingalls as well.
Robin? Catherine? Greg?
Yes. I'd like to ask that Public Works, Streets and Trails Commission agendize looking at River Drive to establish the trail and the trail of fencing from approximately Woodward Boulevard to Pedley Avenue, let's say. I think we all received a letter about that. It's, in some areas, it's going to take some creative thinking and working with and around our trail standards. But I think we need to address that as far as the equestrian standpoint and the impact on the neighbors from overnight parking, cars, RVs, all the good things that come with that. So I don't know if that takes council action, but that's my recommendation, to see this agendized as quickly as possible.
Can you speak into your microphone? I'm sorry, Andy.
Add something to this. I have had conversations with the Public Works Director on this, and try to determine what is the best way to explore options. It's my understanding that this issue has previously been discussed by the Streets, Trails, and Utilities Commission. Okay, so, and it didn't make any recommendation that would alter, change what is currently there. So I'm thinking maybe a potential combination of a couple of council members or planning commission, Streets and Trails Commission would be a potential option instead of just leaving this with the Streets and Trails Commission, since they have previously looked at this and didn't make any substantial recommendation for changes. So just a thought.
John, without a big discussion, this is kind of what I was alluding to, Greg, earlier with the Santa Ana River trails. And like I said, I'm not trying to get a lot of discussion. That also is the designated bike route for the Santa Ana River Trail. So it is with the changes in the Army Corps of Engineers and how our section of the river trails, the Santa Ana River Trails formed, there may be some reasons and that we have to work now. And I gave Brian a date of a current park commission that's actually going to, hopefully it goes to it, about that route, because that we need to make sure, and there is some state money available for that, to fix that route for the bikes and peds. And so we call it a ped trail, so for the horse. So there is some things that are there. I shared it with Brian, but when we think about repair on that, and that's just an idea, that may end up being our route for the Santa Ana River Trail, especially for the bikes. So, and as far as the horse trail, we can incorporate and look at that as we go through. And that's going to be in phases of, that's going to end up going to the Riverside County Transportation Commission. Just saying, we got to look at a bigger picture here, because that's what's going to end up happening.
Well, I remember a while ago, didn't we stripe that section of River Drive that...
Along River Drive is a Class 3. A Class 3 does not require striping. It's a bike route. And the reason for that is just what you brought up, because it narrows in those areas, and you can't get that full width for striping. And the other problem with striping is, I was explaining to Councilman Hoffman, when you go to a Class 2, then you prohibit any parking on the street in that bike lane. So like on Corridon to Norco Drive to Corridon, we have a Class 2, but if you notice that that road was so wide, we were able to stripe for parking and add the bike lane. So it's a little different there. I would ask, if the council decides to move to an ad hoc committee to discuss this, that you add members of the Parks and Recreation Commission, because there is a nexus connection to the River Trails Park, which is right next to River Drive. And they've been engaged with the trail for a long time. So I think overall collaboration and looking at what the deficiencies are or what funding is out there. I know Ted and I talked about ATP grants and some other ones out there that may qualify in that. So if the council moves that way, I would ask that you add the Parks and Rec Commission to it too.
Yeah, part of my concern is, like you're saying, with the Class C bike lane, it has to be that way because the trail narrows down. Same with the equestrian trail, that yes, we can't follow our standard the whole way because there just isn't enough room. So perhaps part of that equestrian trail becomes a single track, okay? I am open to seeing someone like Ted on the ad hoc committee who understands both the equestrian and the overall impact with those trails. I am not interested with anything to do with an ad hoc committee that's going to involve the Corps of Engineers and getting grants and screwing around for another 10 years on something that we should have done years ago. But if this is something that we can move forward with, then I would be more open to that.
So we need to agendize.
Remember what the purpose of
this is just to agendize and to talk about and nothing further.
All right,
you.
I'll second the nothing further. Any other discussion?
Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Councilmember Grummeyer? Yes. Councilmember Hoffman? Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Yes. Mayor Bash?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous.
Is that all, Greg? So I have nothing, but I would like to close the meeting tonight in honor of a very good friend of mine and somebody I think most of you know, Joe McCune. Joe is a longtime Norco resident, decades on the Citizens Patrol, both he and his wife, Joe and Joe. A lot of people don't know that in the 60s and 70s he was very active in protecting the lifestyle. He was one of Lou DiBatteri's freeway fighters. And you can laugh, but what they did is they delayed that freeway long enough that meant developers and people couldn't get into the town. And in the meantime, we fought and beat each other up and developed a lifestyle and knew what we wanted to protect, so that by the time that freeway came through, we were ready for it, for the development that came, and we had our zoning laws in place. Had that not happened, we would be Eastvale. Nothing wrong with Eastvale. But he was also a wonderful ukulele player. He was a wonderful singer. And I heard him actually many times at the Catholic Church for funerals. He would sing the various arias and hymns that needed to be done for the different ceremonies. And he was just a wonderful person. And I'll bet he logged thousands of hours as a Citizens Patrol person, easily, right? Both he and his wife. And I will miss him. I used to walk by his house all the time and wave, and I believe he was actually a big supporter of everybody on this council. In fact, actually, I think every single person he was supportive of. So in honor of him, we'll have a moment of silence. Joe McCune. Thank you. One last thing. Andy, do you think we could send a letter of condolence from the city council to his wife, Jo? Is that possible? And so, coming from all five of us, please. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.